Move your chapeaus. Okay, so I guess it's story time. This is really weird for me. I haven't read anything to people publicly in like years and years and years. But so this one project that Scott and I do, it's this sort of social experiment that we've done for about 10 years now, called the Evil Twin Booking Agency. And basically it's been like, an attempt to bring really awesome and kind of radical ideas into the mainstream. And we do this with a lot of different collaborators and co-conspirators, and it's taken us to some pretty weird, funny places along the way. And we have a lot of silly stories to share. And so we've started to compile them, and what I'm reading is called Deep Prokaryote. And it's kind of a pun on the 70s porn Deep Throat, except with like the name of a microbe. And it's kind of about one of these stories. So, in terms of sheer physical pain, the second sickest I have ever been was in the throes of a sacred medicine ceremony that I will say right now was perfectly legal and purely for research purposes. And it involved a plant-based brew known as ayahuasca. And ayahuasca is sort of like death by magical realism. Like, one minute I was getting comfortable. So let this be a reminder that pain often carries useful information. And a reminder to never let a climate scientist bring dessert to your dinner party. So this all happened in a fancy art gallery in Copenhagen during this international madhouse called the COP15 Climate Conference that happened a few years ago. And the COP15 was a meeting of activists, NGOs, and delegates from governments all around the world. And they came there to tackle the issue of climate change, curbing emissions, and creating a climate debt and reparation system between the polluting first world nations and the developing nations that usually felt the brunt of this. And as a North American, I found that the conference was a thrilling opportunity to be ignored by hundreds of governments at once, instead of just one, like the usual. But there was one way to be heard. We collaborated with a group of professional pranksters and engineers of creative mischief explosions, known as the Yes Men. Basically, we impersonated the Canadian government and the Ugandan government in order to call out Canada's terrible environmental policies. And the night before unrolling our hoax, we had a dinner party. A Danish climate scientist brought dessert, a bowl of shavings from an ancient ice core he drilled from the Greenland ice sheet, covered with a sticky red cherry liqueur. And while this microbial historic snow cone dissolved in my stomach, the climate scientist chatted me up and tried to hard sell me on free market capitalism. His vision, being Danish, had to include socialized healthcare. Now, to hear a Dane evangelizing the free market to an American in the year 2009, following another major stock market crash, was very much like a 16-year-old anarchist extolling the virtues of communism to a veteran of the Soviet Union. But never mind that. My night got even worse. Hours later, while everyone else was preparing for the next morning, I projectile vomited with unrelenting abandon onto the marble floors of this gallery's bathroom. Marble floors that were probably worth more than my entire family's past, present, and future net value. I was now the carrier for the pent-up wrath of ice ages. My intestines undulated inside out like a nervy Mobius strip. Convulsed with pain, the climate conference, climate policy, and politicians stretched out far away, flattening into 2 dimensions and popping back into 3 with sharp edges that cut into the aching, ciliated walls of my intestines. This was much like a certain famous William Burroughs quote, except that I had sliced into the present, and the past was now leaking out through my esophagus.
Brilliant.
I retched in defeat and covered the last available centimeter of the floor with hot, bitter bile before grabbing a roll of paper towels from the sink. I will stop here and say that I am very ladylike. I'm a survivor of food not bombs meals, squatting escapades, and eating disorders, so I knew what to do. After all of this, I threw myself into the care of the most attractive male nurses Danish hospital care has to offer. But there was no time for dysrobics. Inside the walls of the climate conference, my co-conspirators had successfully created a chain reaction of mayhem, drama, hissy fits between delegates, and other confusion, using our usual ragtag arsenal of fake websites, phony press releases, and other tools we had slapped together with thumbtacks and glue. The microbes, however, had worn me down and left me with only time to reflect on one tasty irony. After rising tides, drought, famine, and the other climate-related disasters lurking on the horizon turned humanity into a mass grave, we will eventually become all the oil we ever had needed. And that's pretty much it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
That was awesome. Yay.
Thank you for sharing.
Read another. Yeah.